a movie I dust off every few years, and to be completely honest, it'd been so long since I watched it. It was like watching it all over again.
All right, folks. Well, we're going to do a different type of throwback Tuesday, if you will, a different throwback to an old movie. Sullivan's Travels predates us, Dean. Isn't it nice we could talk about a movie that people are like, you old guys, like, no, this is even older than us, but it's okay.
Oh,
We love it. We love it.
well, this was a movie from my parents' generation.
Yeah.
My mom worked as I'm losing my mind here, an usher at a movie theater when she was in 8th grade. So this movie came out then. So it was one of the first movies she worked.
1941, Sullivan's Travels is one of these things where I think its legacy has been greater than even when it was originally released. Like, it has now made like some of the best comedy lists, some of the best screenplay lists. People have really gone back and can really appreciate. I don't want to say it's almost like Hollywood is not real self-aware, and this is a great commentary on some of that culture, and really kind of dates how much of this stuff has kind of been in existence, if it will. So,
I got you there. I mean, I immediately upon rewatching it, I was like, my God, they could put this in color, and it would be current.
Yep. If Joel McCrea was just played by a different actor, I don't want to touch anything with Veronica Lake. I'm still just blown away at her, and that she was pregnant the whole time when she filmed this, which I did not know. So I was going through some of the trivia. I was like, wow, that's so cool. That's like a neat little nugget to know too, and things like. Do you remember when you first saw this, or is this something that your parents introduced you to, or do you have a cool memory of when you first were subject to this film?
It was kind of what I related. Mom being an usher when she was a teenager. There was a gentleman named Bill Kennedy in Detroit, and every day he would rescreen a movie from that era. And Sullivan's Travels, was one of those things that came on. And my mom, immediately lit up and said, "You need to watch this movie." The best comparison I could be was I found out my nieces and nephews had never seen Monty Python's Holy Grail, so I immediately bought the DVD and made them watch it.
Yeah. This is actually one of those from like the college era, film school aspirations type era for pops, where everything that was on VHS was available. I would print these. I would find these AFI best movies of all time lists. Entertainment Weekly or Rolling Stone would put out magazine lists. All this. So they were just check boxes for me. And this landed on that list and was like, okay, I watched this, and it was great then, and it's just as great. I watched it again today, and had just as much.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I just had just as much fun today as ever. So go ahead.
And it was, I took one film class, and that was to fulfill an arts credit, and so this could be a basic film class movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for those of you who are not real familiar with this, again, 1941, Joel McCrea stars alongside Veronica Lake. He plays John Sullivan, a Hollywood director. He's been very successful doing comedies. And at some point, he just kind of he's trying to sell the studio bosses on doing like a serious film. He's referring to this fictional novel called "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou," which some of you may know is the Coen brother film that used that name, which I think is one of the coolest homages probably in film history. Where like a lot of people don't understand that, so I think that's pretty cool.
I thought that was, that was that aha moment for me, because
Mm.
that was a nothing burger for me. I'd forgotten completely about it, and then, really? Okay. And, that just goes to show you that these great directors are nerds too.
Mm-hmm.
They go back and they watch these things. I'll make a segue. Um, I suggested 12 O'Clock High to you as a
Mm-hmm.
possible movie to watch, and I was rewatching it a few weeks ago, and the thing that stood out to me was the whiskey that all of the characters in the movie was drinking was Vat 69, and that was in Band of Brothers, and the homage to that film paid by Steven Spielberg.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Excuse
Very
me.
good. And for those of you that know, in case you do hear a little bit of the static at Dean's end on his microphone, we've had some technical stuff. We've gotten the best we can do. I will try to clean it up in post, but I am not going to pretend that I am technically savvy. Magitek's Mag is scheduled to also join us here soon, so hopefully she'll be able to throw a third opinion into the mix here, and we could throw some praise and love and encouragement for you guys to track down this film. Now, I will say, Dean, I did not see this streaming anywhere or free for anyone. So if anybody knows of a place that it landed for free or is currently streaming, I didn't see it, but I could have missed it.
I looked around, and finally I just paid for the streaming. I bought it, and then I went ahead and bought the DVD itself.
Yeah, I mean, I have a copy of it, but I meant just for folks that aren't totally sold on our opinion. They're willing to give a flyer for
Oh,
free,
how
but
dare
not
they
other.
not trust a complete stranger on the internet? My
I
God.
two white bearded men that clearly are extremely toxic. Combine us together, it's exponentially toxic. We don't
What?
even have mags here to offset it, Dean.
Let's go shooting.
Oh, yep, that's it, folks. We're out. Dean's donating his ammo box, so it'll be on his tab. Let's go blow some stuff up. I'm down
There
with that.
you go.
Yeah, no, I guess we have to do videos, but I just had such a fun time because I felt like a movie like this, and this is how you know it's timeless, because you feel like there's parts that you have forgotten, right? So the silliness when he gets into the little boy's tank, right? And they speed it up. It's just such a fun chase sequence.
What did he call himself? I'm a Whippet Kid or something like that?
Something like that. And I was like, what is happening? And I'm laughing. I'm kind of like,
God. It's
yes.
like I said, that's the pratfall moment for that show for me, is because he's in that, basically a death trap, and the people that are following him to make his journey authentic are trapped inside that bus trying to follow him at exceedingly crazy speeds, at least for that time and those road conditions.
Yep. It's completely zany. Obviously, I thought about how, you have like Mad, Mad, Mad World, which people are more familiar with, and things like that, with this sort of like zany approach to comedy. Yet, there are little things that you'll pick up in this scene where it's just so silly, like the carriage what goes out in front of them, and there's like, and I thought about like, I don't know, like a dozen of like old Disney films and stuff like that. I thought about, there's so many things that this is in that vein of fun and
well, when I saw this, I couldn't help but think, if Veronica Lake had been there, the car would have flipped into the air, and all three of them would have wound up in that bale of hay.
So she could have been rolling around in the hay. Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely. Yes, hence we have another Frank, a young Frankenstein. Well, let's take a pause from our movie here for a moment. Put us right back up on top, because now we have some class that's in the mix here. Dean, Magitek Mags is in the house. How are you, lady?
Hi. How's everybody doing?
We're
doing great.
Very
Thank you
nice
so much.
to finally hear your voice.
Yes. Hi. Is my audio okay?
You're good. Dean has a little static on his end. Like we hit a
Okay.
little technical snag, but we're going to do the best we can with that.
Okay,
We
that's
all we
perfectly
did was
fine.
do a kind of a quick little introduction. We talked about the movie just briefly, those kinds of things. Yeah. So before we get too much further into it, first again, thanks again for doing this. It's always fun to point out some golden age type cinema films and things like that, right?
Well, admittedly, I had never heard of Sullivan's Travels until you mentioned it to me.
Oh,
And it's so funny because I was doing some research on it, and even like Veronica Lake, she sounds familiar, but I've not seen her in any one of my favorite films. So I've just been just
Yeah,
reading up on everything, and yeah, it's quite interesting. So I'm ready to
yeah,
get into this.
yeah. Her hairstyle inspired Jessica Rabbit.
Yes, that's what I was like, "Ooh, this is a Jessica Rabbit inspiration," and then, of course, I read later that, yep, that's what it was, man. But she really wasn't that big of an actress, though. She wasn't like the Katharine Hepburns or uh, uh, oh gosh, all these other big time stars. Because I don't it's not one that it's not this is an actress that I've not seen frequently as far as visiting older cinema. So it's very interesting. But yeah, I definitely saw the inspiration.
Oh yeah, she's been in like three movies that I can remember offhand, but like the most recent one was in the 50s. The other one was I can't remember the name of it offhand, but she played a nurse in World War II during the Battle of Bataan, and then she played in a movie I Married a Witch, and I think that was the basis for the television series Bewitched.
Huh.
hmm. Okay.
Interesting.
Okay. I know she's had a couple of films with Alan Ladd. So I'm
Yes.
not totally familiar with their relationship exactly, but I know they've been in several movies together. Gun for Ire, I was familiar with, and Blue Dahlia, I think is the right name for that
I
movie.
think it's Black Dahlia.
I think she's in a different one, but she might be in
It
that one
might
as
be
well.
Blue Dahlia. I've not seen that
It's
one.
it's it's yeah, it's the Blue Dahlia.
Yeah, the Black Dahlia I think is the newer one with Ortman and stuff in it. So, but no, I agree, Max. I mean, Veronica Lake is not a name that comes front and center when we think about those classic actresses, but her influence is definitely felt. Her
Mhm.
performance was really very sweet and genuine in this film. I thought that it really, really was just perfect for this sort of like comedic flavor that they were really going for.
Mhm.
Yeah. So this is your first time watching it. Did you come away with any, like, what were some of your initial impressions or thoughts that you could convey for folks who really haven't seen it yet?
Well, funny, I haven't watched it either. So it's kind of I'm
Oh,
sorry, that's a my bad on my part. I was
Oh,
like, I'm gonna be watching it through you guys here, as we're going through this. No, we don't have to go back. It's okay. I was
no,
I was
no, we're
I
gonna go
was
back
reading
a
up
little
on
bit.
the summary of it, and it's a it's a very fascinating story, or at least the story from the premise that I read was, he's a comedian, writer, director, whatever, and he's getting tired of that, and he wants to do something wants to do serious work. And so in order for him to do serious work, he wants to live seriously, for the lack of a better phrase. And so he decides to go through the hard times of humanity, or how humanity has to deal with the day to day. So
well,
it seems like a really funny premise. I like it.
Yeah, his idea of writing a serious movie or getting more grounded is
Mhm.
to just live among the people and just basically like have tattered clothes. Like he doesn't quite exactly know how. And then some of the comedy, which we really won't be able to do justice, is sort of like the PR stunt. So this is the bus of the studio executives and such following them. Um,
Mhm.
and before
well,
we get to that, there is a great gag that's early on. So let me back up to the sequence where they're bantering about movies or whatever. There's a gag about including sex all the time. Like it's such a funny reference for its time. Like I don't even know how they would. I guess
Yeah,
it's
how
like
did
the
it get by
stereotype
through
in
the
my head.
censors? Yeah.
No, but it
well,
was just sort of like casually thrown in. So go ahead, Dean.
Oh, wow.
Well, there was also a different connotation for sex at
Yes.
that in that time frame. I mean, you know, for Gone with the Wind, uh, oh gosh, what was his name? Frankly, my dear,
Clark Gable.
Clark Gable, um, went in his T-shirt. He took off his shirt, and that was such a scandal, that oh gosh, no actor in Hollywood has ever not been perfectly presented in a movie.
Right.
And apparently, this is to put it in modern terms, it's like Henry Cavill taking off his shirt in Witcher is the reception that got.
Hmm. Yeah. So what you have here is this sort of like, and I really love this with it with some historical context, and I would love to hear more from Mags after you see it too, because
Hmm.
it's sort of like the Hollywood infrastructure. People that actually, see them on Twitter or hear their PR statements or whatever, if they think that these people are actually making all of these decisions and comments on their own, you're completely fooled. Because even in this movie, part of the pretext is the producers being followed by basically all of these studio handlers that are basically trying to turn into a PR stunt.
Well, the
So part of it,
gentleman in the left of that screen
yeah,
is the paid reporter. He's the publicist,
yep.
for lack of a better term.
And this is his studio funded physician, and this is the on the bus chef. So there's tons of gags and just back and forth because um, what gives us good chemistry, and I wouldn't even know how to get the right spot to give it the right kind of joke, but we could play a little segment and see what happens here. So everything is just very like a lot of little quips, a lot of little innuendos, a lot of little things like that, a lot of back and forth. And it's about actors playing well off of one another with a very, very well done script. The gags keep going because they end up crashing. So what ends up happening is the chase sequence is he plays the hobo and he ends up getting picked up by this young kid, and he's got this like revved up like go-kart type machinery. He has a joke for it, calling it like this tank or whatever, and
He
it
called it a
becomes this,
whippet tank or something
yeah,
like
something
that.
like that. And
And
it's this crazy little contraption, and it's just he's whizzing around, and they dodge a cart and all sorts of shenanigans. There it is. There it is. I found it. Um, and you get all these gags and the bus. So here's this shenanigan, Mags. This is this crazy, this crazy sequence, and they play it in they speed up the frames.
Oh yeah, you can see that. That's when it's a comedy when they start speeding up the frames like that.
Yeah, yeah. So they play up the different crashes and things like that. So then he goes and basically is going to live, and he's among these like really prim and proper ladies. He's got his shirt off, chopping wood. There's all these back and forth because they just think of him as the the hobo. He's just the hobo.
well,
Uh,
I look at it as, there are a couple of, outdated term, but what the heck, proper spinsters. And
yes.
so, but one of the themes that keeps coming back will be just a little ahead here. I won't spoil it right now. And go ahead. But this was funny. When I saw this scene, it reminded me of Arsenic and Old Lace.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's a good reference. Yeah. Um, and the back and forth is the lady on our right thinks that she's going to kind of make some moves on him and try to get him to stay. And it's also, do you think he'll stay? Oh, I think he'll stay. What do you think he'll stay? So all that kind of stuff. So there's all of this back and forth. Again, spinster is a really good term for this kind of stuff. And I think she puts her hand on his leg and he kind of like leans back or moves, or maybe she's trying to go for his hand. It's kind of funny. Um, so everything is just played for like levity's sake and that kind of thing. This is what it's like in their home, and they make little jokes and little innuendos about that as well. So
Well, the nice thing about this, and I had to think about it in retrospect, is every one of his major epiphanies in this movie occurs after he's watched a film.
Okay, that's true. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you're right, because they go to the theater. You know, I didn't make that connection exactly. The other epiphany is very, very clear, but that little one, we kind of skip over that a little bit. But here, so he doesn't have PJs, so she's kind of got little jokes about, you know, the husband who wore PJs or didn't wear PJs and things like that, because she's totally, you know, she's trying to scoop on him a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Joseph wore a nightgown. Of course, this is a picture of Joseph on the wall. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's just played for a laugh. And then it's him sneaking out, figure out how to dodge them.
Yep.
He
I had
literally makes
visions of Mexican Iron Man here.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, this is the original Mexican Iron Man.
So this is the original Mexican Iron Man. He makes like the typical rope blanket with just all knots together. He catches his pants on a nail. And then falls into a barrel of water. So that barrel there by that window, he falls in that. He knocks over everything, making all the so all of the silliness you can imagine. So when he goes to hitchhike, he finds a truck, and the guy's like, "You can get in the back." And then he falls asleep. He doesn't even know where he is. And they took him right back to Hollywood. All of his little journey was basically like a circle to end up right back to where he kind of started.
And this scene is enter Veronica Lake.
Yep. And she is sort of the aspiring actress who's kind of given up, ready to go home. She has no idea that he's a producer because she just, you know, takes him at face value. And the banter is sort of like, you know, like what's your story, kid kind of stuff. But also because the audience knows so much more information than the characters, this plays just beautifully well. Great chemistry, tons of fun.
Well, in this duo, what I really liked is each one of them had their abilities. You know, obviously his is as a mover and shaker in Hollywood, and hers are being a smart kid from, I think she's from Connecticut, and she's, you know, basically did the audition rounds, working as a chorus girl, you know, trying to get her break in Hollywood. And, you know, here's the guy who is at the summit of the world she's trying to break into, and yet he's trying to throw that all away in search of knowledge of her existence.
Yeah, and he's this uber wealthy Hollywood producer, and some of the jokes are about buying him pancakes and stuff because she's going to pay, right? Because she thinks.
And she has no idea who he is.
Correct.
That's I love stories like this.
Well, the great bit of the conversation goes on, and she's talking about being interviewed by I don't know, directors or casting agents, so that she can get a role in one of the movies that he might direct.
Yeah, and he's dropping little subtleties. Like, well, do you have so and so's number? Do you have this way of getting a hold of? And she's like, she doesn't. Hence the reason she's a failure. So anyway, that's kind of how this kind of plays out, and then it sets up the fact that he refers to himself in third person. So he knows this guy who is a wealthy guy but out of town. So, you know what I'll do is I'll go and retrieve that car from his estate, and I'll give you the ride. Right. So that's pretty much and again, the audience knows way more than the character does. So now she's not in the know, but what he doesn't know, because he just went and took the car, is he doesn't realize that his staff, the butler, etc., they called the police because the car's stolen. So they end up, and he's like, oh, it'll be no big deal. You'll see. Oh, wait, I got to sound back on. Here come the sirens. Let me go back just a tad. I got to figure out how to get the right. Yeah, there's a great line coming up, and hopefully, well, I can clip it. So everything is played on little subtlety, and I think that's what makes this very smart and clever. Again, it's relying on smart and clever writing rather than, you know, some of the stuff that we get today.
Well, that was back during a time where uh Hollywood was able to master the art of subtlety, in
Mm.
anything, whether it be, love, romance, a character dropping hints about who he is in a way, but also in such a way that it doesn't reveal too much. And of
Well,
course, like you said, we're the audience, we know who he is, but she doesn't. So we have to look in the perspective of her eyes of what's going on. So you have to write in that kind of perspective. And writing back then was able to do that.
well, it is, it takes for granted that people in the audience have a working brain,
Yep.
which, and
Yeah, you have to be willing to, you know, trust your audience, and that is not something we do a lot of today. That's for sure.
Mhm.
But he has to come clean now. So that's his staff that shows up to bail him out. So that's his staff. And they're like, yeah, that's Mr. Sullivan. So then he comes clean. Why are you dressed like this? What are you doing? It's like blah blah blah. And then he sends for the car. He's so rich, he has a phone thing in the car.
And see, that's interesting, you point that out because you're right. Not everybody was able to afford stuff like that back in the day. So when you saw something like that, or if you ever read something like The Great Gatsby or whatever, there
Mhm.
are definitely clues and hints in that book showing you are told that he's rich, but there's also other ways to tell he's rich. So these are one of these clues here that points to that fact of what kind of wealth this character has.
oh, he's definitely got that, and you know, and again, it shows his disconnect from her in
Exactly.
that, you know, he takes all of this for granted, and for her, it's a whole other um, culture.
Yeah, and it plays so well because you definitely have sort of like the Hollywood elite versus everybody else,
Well,
Yeah.
right?
look at her; she's smoldering the entire time. You know, just
Yeah.
feeling, you know,
Well, she's out of place. She feels like, here's somebody who is completely out of touch to her and everybody else around them. And yeah, it's it's got to be jarring in a way.
It has to be caviar on these crackers, I think is what he's doing. I mean, it's just like lap of luxury, right? She's like, what on earth have I gotten myself into? I mean, it's just insane how off the chain uber
well,
wealthy this guy is.
and also a pool like that would be expensive today. You
Oh
Yeah.
know,
yeah.
and back then, I mean, yeah, those are marble tiles. They're coming from North Carolina to be put in that pool.
And then to continue our little Jessica Rabbit and that type of demeanor, she sits on his lap in this sequence. And this gets so silly that they all fall in the water. Everybody's going in the water. Now, notice that he's grabbing her legs like she's going to be faced towards him. Ooh, okay. And they
Oh,
go. Yes, it's so much fun. And
Um,
then we got to cut back to the story a little bit.
and
Yeah.
this is sets up the actions of the next scene anyway. And you know what I'm talking about there, Pops.
Yeah, yeah. So we're going to get right back on the horse with the scheme. Like, what else can we do, right? So now we're going to go back to scheming, and now the scheme will be she's begged her way into joining him on the hobo adventure, but disguising herself as a boy.
Well, if you go back to the two butlers, that sequence right there is comedy gold
Yeah.
because they're in the kitchen. The first one is asking, where would one who is, a hobo jump onto your train? And they just hang up on him. The second one calls and he explains they have a gentleman's wager about where a hobo would jump onto a train from and at what time. And, the person at the rail yard, thinking that, obviously before crackpot, now man of means asking me a question, and then to put the icing on the cake, that butler at the end says, oh, by the way, I won the wager.
Very much like what they did with Trading Places, right? With the wager. So yeah, I love it. They pull up with this fancy car and let them out dressed as hobos. It's just there's so many subtleties. A very good point, Dean. 'Cause that really we easily could have just skipped over some of that, but um, it's so much. It's so much like you guys are. Sir, you are completely out of your mind doing this, and now you're taking this girl along with you, and they basically just jump a car. And the other hobos are not having it, Mags. The other hobos are like, nope, something's wrong here.
Well, they don't look like hobos, especially in their faces,
Well, that and, the great one was as they're trying to get into the train, the hobo, the one hobo looks at the other and says, amateurs.
Yeah, they don't know what they're doing. Yeah.
And again,
Yeah.
that scene right there reminded me of George Lucas in the first Star Wars, where the droids are the witnesses to everything, and so these two gentlemen in the car are, in my opinion, that chorus that later becomes the droids. Excuse me.
And yeah, she's supposed to be. I mean, she's just so beautiful in all of this. So, and they just have such good chemistry together.
It is funny though. I was reading some backstory on some of this on Veronica Veronica Lake. She wasn't really easy to work with. Apparently, she seemed to be a very hard person to get along. But it's amazing when you hear stories like that, even from any kind of actor or actress that you like, and it doesn't translate on the screen. That's acting. Like being able to work together in those types of environments if you have two people who don't like each other yet still perform well on screen. You can't see that very often today.
I don't know if I think if everyone didn't have social media on, there'd be some type of mystery. But now, I mean, every bit of drama, and the perfect example today is Tom Holland. Whatever you do, don't tell Tom Holland anything that you don't want the press to know about the movie.
Yeah, the inability to keep a secret is pretty renowned in the Tom Holland publicity camps. But I remember when it leaked, like how difficult Bruce Willis had grown, to work with, others, and how demanding they would be. These stories would leak out over the years. Now we have almost like direct communication with the obscenity. I mean, I purposely retweeted something recently that Mark Hamill had tweeted because it was just completely absurd. Like, dude, please, no one cares. Like, you stop, just stop already. Yeah,
I've pretty much filtered out Hollywood. I find it's better that way. I did see something from Anna this morning where what's her name, Renee Ziegler, was talking about being paid in perpetuity by streaming. Sorry, my dog has somehow decided that bumping my lampstand is
he just wants to
joy.
be a part of things, Dean. How dare you not include him? That's all. So. Well, no, I couldn't agree more. And Veronica Lake was pregnant when she filmed, so I don't even know how much of it was tied to, not feeling good and whatever. Who knows?
Exactly. And this looks like a very, I mean, obviously there's stunt work, but you have to be able to also fake it in such a way that, or through cuts and editing to make sure it works. And I'm sure there was some physical stuff that she had to do in order to make it look real. So obviously there's stunt doubles and everything else, but to the point where I'm sure it was a little physically demanding as well.
This would be a very difficult shoot, to be honest. And I say that because even as a YouTuber, Max, like we can attest to, you know, the difficulty we can have having a conversation and not talking over one another and setting each other up properly for the next thing. And
Mhm.
this entire script is predicated on that working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it looks to me too, it's kind of reminds me, I'm just looking at clips right here, and it kind of reminds me of like the comedy sense of, you know, Abbott and Costello and, you know, Three Stooges or whatever. And there's a lot of comedic physical stunts, so to
Oh,
speak, with it.
interjecting here.
Oh.
Mags, you and I can now be friends because you know Abbott and Costello.
Oh,
You're there.
Mags is well versed. And for those of you, I will put the link in the description for our What's Your Story, where we try to at least shine the light briefly on some of the original foundational elements of cinema. But yeah, no, I have the box set of Abbott Costello. Mags knows her stuff. She's
Yep.
definitely she's
It's
an
been
old soul and a beautiful young body. That's for sure. It's something.
and I like discovering new old stuff all the time. So because it's new to me.
Yeah, this is
So
one of those. Like I said, I think it was before you came on. I said, yeah, this is a film that has aged well. Like it is, its reputation as a comedy, its reputation as a really good screenplay. All of those things have grown and been more well respected over the years, rather than things that have been cast aside.
it's amazing how that happens with some of these movies. Like Casablanca, for instance, as I'm using this as an example, Casablanca, for instance, was considered a B kind of film. Like it wasn't like A top notch or whatever. But you know, it's amazing how a lot of these films, through time, because they were done so well, they kind of morph into a top tier level of screenplay. So
Well,
True.
so it's amazing how that works.
uh,
That just shows the testament of how well these movies were made. The script, the dialogue, the acting, all of it, you know, was well put together and can age like fine wine. They don't. Some don't. Not every movie can age well, and a lot of movies from back then still age okay. So
oh, there's a dirty little secret about this movie and many others, like you've mentioned, in that, you know, those B movies that, or what they considered B movies back then, were not protected by trademarks. So when television came along and they started doing movie shows, these local stations would look for things where that they weren't protected by trademarks, so they didn't have to kick back money to the major studio. And that's where your It's a Wonderful Life and, fortunately, Sullivan's Travels fell in. So, you know, these are movies that may have been forgotten, but by virtue of the studios forgetting about them, we got to see them.
Yeah, this is one of these films that I probably should have checked YouTube to see if it was just available through YouTube. Because of its age, it actually may just actually someone may actually have it downloaded or uploaded for free. So that may be an option as well. I didn't mention that earlier. I should have looked. I did not do that.
I
Oh,
can do that right now.
I didn't even know that was an option. Thank you. I've
Yeah,
learned
there's a
something.
lot of. I actually have a playlist. Well, it's a private playlist of full movies. So sometimes if I don't own it physically, I could just like, oh, it's already on YouTube. Someone already has it. There's
Okay.
like a live action Star Blazers. There's tons of documentaries, tons of Star Wars documentaries. For those of you who know my affinity for vintage Star Wars stuff, tons of those are actually just publicly put out there. So this might actually be in that category. But back to the story. Remember, they're on a hobo journey. This owner of this cafe diner thinks they're hobos. He's willing to basically just give them one cup of coffee and one donut. And Mags, it's played for laughs in the sense of he kind of like abruptly gives them a donut. It's like he just like you get one. And it's very much like you're not getting more. I'm paying for this. I'm never going to make a profit, I think is his joke.
Yeah.
And it was kindness, a gruff kind of kindness, but kindness nonetheless.
Yep. So they got to head back into town. Well, they were on a cattle car. So once they're found by the publicity hounds, right? It's
Well,
all sort of like it's sort of. Go ahead.
they weren't found. He found out, like, where are we? Oh, we're in Las Vegas, which is where he sent the bus in the first place. And he looks out, at that point you see him kind of grimace, and he looks out the window, and there's the bus.
Yeah, the bus is already there. Yep. Yep. The doctor says he's sick, and then she's, this is them racing around with all their publicity. And then you saw it briefly. There was a quick shot of the shower. Again, just, she's giving Veronica Lake's character advice and suggestions and things like that. So, it's all beautiful stuff. And then I just love that it's just, how could I be alone if you're with me? And I love the fact that she does play with his hair a lot in this movie, which is something you don't see in movies anymore. And in real life, that is like such a normal part of relationshiping. It's so strange that movies don't have any sort of like normal stuff. But anyway, so back on the hobo journey.
It's a way of showing physical affection without it being weird. It's
Perverted, yeah.
Yeah, it's just natural.
I was just watching the other night Zombieland, and there's a line in there where what was it? Columbus said, the one thing he's always wanted to do was brush a girl's hair off her ear. Okay, but you think about it, it's just those little details of intimacy that can be, intimate.
A point of connection, yeah, absolutely. So the other thing that happens here, Mags, too, I think it's important for you and everyone else too, is he explains his marriage for tax reasons, and then how this person has basically screwed him. So it's like, oh, we're supposed to do this to reduce the taxes, but this backfired. So now I actually play worth, and now she's having an affair with my business manager, and she won't give me a divorce. And it's just a big mess. So it's sort of set up as a way of diffusing the romantic chemistry that they have. Because now you're sort of like, oh, wait a minute, they can't be together? Like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he's going to go back amongst the hobos and hand out money and do this. He's got his scheme back on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where he's going to go.
I was thinking about that particular aspect. He was handing out, what was it, $2,000,
$5 bills, which are like $100 or more. Yeah.
I mean, that's a fortune. $2,000 back then. I mean, heck, when you and I were kids, Pops. $2,000, you could buy a used car and have $1,800 left to play with.
Oh yeah, it's crazy to think about. I mean, my first car, it ran. It was $150.
Yeah.
Yeah, my first car.
And they keep going back to this. He leaves home with a dime in his pocket, and a dime will get him a cup of coffee and breakfast.
Right.
It's a big difference.
So amongst the people, he starts to really get thrown into like what impoverished life is actually like. And the communications, of course, the studio doesn't get it. This is the marriage divorce. You can't get a divorce without collusion. Yeah, it's great. Okay. So he's handing out the money. And when he falls asleep during this sequence, we end up with like one of our important sort of like contrived moments of mix up. So the other hobo has his shoes, stole his shoes.
That was something earlier.
Yeah, I got to go back to when that happened, because it happened back over here. Yeah, it happened back in here. During all of this is when the shoes get swapped and the other guy has his shoes. Um, and what he's doing is the hobo is in the tracks scooping up some of the money and doesn't get out of the way.
Oh.
Yeah. So all of the news is breaking because they think that when they find the name in the shoes, they think it's him.
Again, in 1940, or was it 39 when this was filmed, you know, there was no, uh, forensic science of our degree now. And so finding some type of identification on the body, it was like, okay,
Yeah.
that must be him.
Yeah. So he's actually on this train, and why does he have like an amnesia? I'm sorry, he has like a memory loss.
Well, he got clubbed by the other man at the state, back at the rail yards.
Well, this
And
guy hits him again, right? Because he's jumped the train. So this guy is kind of like, hey, you're taking advantage of the thing, and he gets a little confrontational, and he picks up a rock.
well, Sullivan is concussed at this moment.
Yeah.
And so, what happens next is unfortunate.
And he starts pummeling the guy with this rock, and it's supposed to be the blood and stuff's on his hand. He's really now in a big mess. He kind of
And
doesn't really quite have his memory right, and he's gotten into this fight with this yard boss, who's who, I don't want to say attacks him, but basically attacks him. He
well,
ends up with the
he was in a fight with a railroad cop, and there's a
right.
movie called King of the North that is really great about that. But the thing I like about this scene in the courtroom is clearly, my dog has found a squeak toy. Clearly, he's still concussed, and everybody is foggy in the background to indicate that.
Yeah. So what they're going to do is they're going to try to convey the memory, kind of like it's everything is out of focus. So things are sort of like coming into focus. He's like, oh crap, I'm Sullivan. I'm the person that everybody thinks is dead. So that's what's playing out. He gets 6 years of hard labor. He's sort of kind of coming back to grips with who he is and what's actually happened. Let me see here. And again, he's played up for all of this, and then you end up with the church sequence. So we end up with this, the most important scene. And one of the things I think that this shows the boldness of what they were going for. What Preston Sturgis was really, really accomplishing here was this interracial gathering. And they bring in the prisoners into the church, and they're going to watch a Disney cartoon and have laughs and bring joy and happiness to everyone. It's the playful Pluto cartoon.
Yeah, this is wonderful.
And it just breaks all the barriers. There's no racial barriers or no class barriers. It's like funny is funny. A movie can bring happiness and joy.
Well,
And yeah.
I was particularly moved by the welcoming of the prisoners in it. And this is the only musical portion of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And, just really well done.
And it's a way to show some I'm sure this is probably something that's kind of felt, but because by the use of the Disney classic cartoon and having this in a church um with people of different, different belief systems and everything, it kind of brings it back around in a way of like a renewal of like a spiritual renewal of bringing back that childlike innocence like he had in the he almost had a childlike innocence, I guess you could say, from the beginning, where he's coming back around now and he's already dealt an interest, he wanted to live the hobo life and he got what he asked for, but it came with consequences. So now he's coming back around in a more of a spiritual awakening and understanding of the world.
Exactly. Yeah. This is the sequence. He's like, oh man, he's really struggling with a crisis of faith because he thought he knew the world,
Exactly.
and it's completely 100% opposite to what he expected. He thought doing comedies in Hollywood and making frivolous, silly, fun movies to entertain the masses was just pointless. He needed to do something that was heavy. He needed something that was meaningful. He needed to preach to the audience. Let me get out amongst the people and figure out what I can talk to them about. Let me get to know them better. Instead, he found out, man, if I can make them laugh, that is so much more powerful than me lecturing somebody.
Well,
Yep.
my feeling was that he started off and said, his opinion was he had all the answers to begin with.
True.
He was just embarking on this journey to prove to the studio heads that I'm right. All the time, when he was being pompous, it was like, we've got all these problems. The common man is thinking about this, this, and this. And no, the common man is, where's my next meal coming from? Will I have a roof over my head tonight? Are my kids going to go to bed hungry? And Sullivan was like, oh no, they're concerned about world politics. What's that dastardly man Hitler going to do next? It's I guess what I was saying is he was projecting the worries of the idle rich onto the common people.
Yeah, perfectly stated, Dean. Perfectly stated. And exactly why we feel like this is a movie that modern cinema and Hollywood needs to watch, because it really is that exact type of divide that we still have. And what's really fascinating is he's still just so clever and smart. I mean, as I was rewatching this, I thought, oh, this is so smart. What he does is he confesses to murdering Sullivan, so that way someone will pay attention to him. Like he can speed up the process of getting identified and kind of rescued, for the lack of a better term.
Well, if you
Right.
think about it, it's really brilliant, because what are they going to do? Give him the death penalty for killing himself?
Right.
Yeah. Well, and it's fascinating too, because here he made he made successful comedies for these studios, but then he complains about it's not enough to bring
Mm-hmm.
joy to as simple as joy to the masses of of people out there. And he got to feel what it was like in the real world and why it is really important to have simple fun.
Well, this sequence right here is the classic 1930s comedy montage,
Mm.
right? No words spoken, just the chain of events to come to his rescue. And if you look, it's Veronica Lake charging, leading the troops.
Yeah. She's running off one sunset. She's running past Indians. She's knocking people over.
Well,
It's the
here in
press
the
people
meantime,
reacting. Go ahead.
she's gotten successful while he's been away.
Well, that was something when she was sitting there in the chair when he was pronounced dead, and the studio boss comes over and he's like, "You were his last great discovery.
Mm-hmm.
I will take care of you."
Mm.
And so, even in his disappearance/death, he was taking care of her.
And this is a sequence where he finds out now, because he was dead. His wife is now a widow, so she remarries. So now he's not dead. So now, in order to not fall under bigamy laws, she has to let him have the divorce. So yeah, that's I this is one of those things that doesn't age particularly as well as it did back then, but it puts Veronica Lake and him back together again. And we like, our brains, my brain kind of snaps a little bit trying to process this. Like, wait a minute, so he's still married to her, but she married someone else because she didn't know, she thought he was dead. Okay, fair enough. Okay, I'll just play along because they get to be together.
And that's, you don't need to be, you don't need a lawyer consultant. It's just this is the simple answer that gives the happy ending.
Well, and
Dean
it makes
says
sense.
that.
It makes sense too, because if you think about it, um, you're off the heels of you're still trying to get through the era of the Great Depression, and then you're also trying. There's America around this. Well, there's war going on right now, um, and stuff like that happens all the time where a spouse might have been found or thought to be dead for years, and then all of a sudden they show back up again. So you're going to have a simple answer on the books for it, because if they've remarried, um that makes it
Well,
quite difficult. So yeah, I think it's good to have a
well, it,
simple answer for that solution, and I think it's realistic in that
well,
sense.
I'm not sure when in 41 this was released, but it's also one of those movies that I count as a pre-war film.
Yes. Especially if it was done in the late if it was done 38, 39, 40, and that's
Mhm.
in those years.
I mean, yes,
Uh,
Europe
But
and
the rest of
Asia
Europe
were
was
at
already
war.
dealing with its own issues at that time.
Mhm.
I pulled it up because I wanted to make sure. Because yeah, it had a Christmas release because they were trying to squeeze it in right before the first of the year, so they'd qualify for the Oscars. So it was screened for critics in early December. And it was released wide and premiered, and actually premiered in Tennessee,
Hmm.
and then it premiered in L.A. in early '42.
Okay.
So, yeah, the Office of Censorship, though, would not allow this film to go overseas because of, quote, the long sequence showing life in prison chain gang, which is most objectionable because of the brutality and inhumanity with which prisoners are treated. So they were just trying to control the propaganda used by enemies. So, in other words, if we show the chain gang footage, uh, our enemies overseas would take that footage, splice it out, and try to say, "Look at these Americans and what they do to their prisoners," or "Look at what they do to our prisoners," things like that. So this movie
Right.
was censored for that reason.
Yeah, so
And
this movie is 1941. So yeah, right on that cusp of,
right.
Hmm.
and of course Europe at that time has already been dealing with they were already within the war. So yeah, I
What
can
did you
understand
say
that
the
concept.
release date was, Pops?
1941,
No,
it
I
says.
mean
Yeah,
what date, if they have
it
it.
it screened for critics in early December, right before Pearl Harbor. By the time it opened wider, which is probably one of the reasons too, it didn't make a lot of financial money. Is it's coming out literally in the middle of our reaction to Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the bad news would have been coming in. I mean, at
Yeah.
that
Correct.
point, the people would have heard about Guam falling, Singapore, the invasion of the Philippines, Wake Island. So yeah, I can see that, but I can also see this movie making the rounds of every training camp in the United States.
Oh yeah.
So there's that.
Well, I read that Veronica Lake was one of the pinup girls, so that was very popular amongst our troops.
Oh,
So
she's
I
very, very sexy in this movie.
I've seen pictures of my mom. Again, you're talking about she was 6 years younger than my dad, so in 41 she would have been 15. So she had the Veronica Lake hairstyle in some of the pictures I saw.
Yeah. Yeah, because she is. So she would have been 19 when this film was released, Veronica Lake.
wow, but see that they're young. Well, it's just like Ingrid Bergman when she did Casablanca, she was very young too.
Well, that was the thing about the studio system then is, you know, they could bring in someone like Veronica Lake and, see what their chops were. I mean, gosh, I'm trying to remember. He was one of John Wayne's regular co-stars. Ben Johnson said, he got hired by Ford because he was a cowboy handling the horses, and then he got offered, a job as an actor at the studio. It was like $100 a week, and he was making $100 a month as a ranch hand. And he was like, "Okay, this is for me."
Hmm. She died really, really young. She had liver cirrhosis. But they
Yeah,
make a mention that she wrote a biography, an autobiography. I'm like, wow, really? I'd be interested to read. I love autobiographies. Sure
I
enough, the autobiography of Veronica Lake. Look at that.
well, her son wrote a book as well, and I'd be interested to hear that. Because apparently, according to what I was reading, is she had some psychological problems that, of course, with medicine at the time they treated
Right.
and only made them worse. So,
Yeah, it said she had schizophrenia. So, yeah.
but I mean, this movie is still, you know, honestly one of my favorites all time.
Um, I was really just so pleasantly surprised and pleased with just how well the fun experience held up. Like for me, like I said, I haven't watched this probably since college. I don't remember, exactly specifically, but probably early '90s. And then to go back to it and then to visit again today, like a couple of those sequences we're talking about are just, I'm just thrilled. Just puts a smile on your face and you have a good time. And then everything you were saying earlier, Max, that sweetness, that smart writing, all those kinds of things. Just a really, really good script. Just a really, really good script. Oh, now we have a kitty cameo. We had the doggy cameo later, and now we got the kitty cameo.
Yeah, my house is chaotic,
Gotcha.
which is the best way to have it.
Sometimes there's peace in the chaos.
Well, as long as he's not taking blood samples, I'm good.
There you go. Dean, you mentioned watching this sort of regularly, like every year or so, that kind of thing. What's your significant other think about this movie?
Say again?
Your significant others and family or other folks that you've kind of shared this with?
Well, this was something I'd watch with my mom.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd come home on leave, and my first paycheck from the Marine Corps, I bought her a VCR, right? So it's just like, Mom, here you go. This is new technology. Yes, I'm that old. And, we went out and found some movies that she loved, and this was one of them. And so I'd come home on leave, and, God, I only took leave like every 18 months, so I only came home about 4 times while I was in service. And when I get home, we'd dust off the favorite movies, make some popcorn. I'd go, drive up to the local grocery store. We'd, get the food that we wanted to have, and we'd sit down and do a movie marathon. And so, the old movies, she would ask me to, go get something, and I'd go, okay. And, she also loved the old radio serials. So, I became very well versed in the Shadow radio series. And so it's again, it's a bit of family nostalgia. I honestly, outside of my mom, you're the first one I've shared this with.
I was so happy that you did, and I saw it, and I kind of lit up because it's like one of those things. And we were kind of messaging a little bit about Veronica Lake too, and I'm like, she is super, super beautiful. Like she's just an underrated name and things like that. Max, you and I talked a little bit during our conversation before about your sort of like movie watching, family rituals, and that kind of thing. Talk a little bit about that to folks who may not have heard us talk about that before.
Oh gosh, we have several rotational movies all the time. Like if you think about, especially during the holidays, It's a Wonderful Life is one of them, even though it's technically not really a Christmas movie. When it was released, it wasn't. But because it has Christmas in it and it has Christmas themes of redemption and celebration of life and family and community, it's a great Christmas classic in my family. And of course, many others like White Christmas and everything. I know we're talking about Christmas now with it being the summertime, but we have
I live in
kind
Michigan. We can talk about it in summer.
It just there's always there's always ones that are in the I would call it the rotational schedule. Like, oh, we haven't seen North by Northwest in a while. We need to pop
Mm.
that one in. Um, what's another one? Gosh, there's several. Casablanca is always one that I thoroughly enjoy. Anything with Humphrey Bogart, Cary Grant, Jimmy Stewart, like Harvey and Philadelphia Story is another good one. That's a funny
To
classic.
interject here for a second, you like Jimmy Stewart. Do you like Henry Fonda as well?
He's not typically in my rotational schedule.
Well, they did a couple of buddy movies, and so if you ever get a chance and you just want to giggle at some antics, watch Cheyenne Social Club. It's like probably late '60s, early '70s. It's got Shirley Jones as a very young
Okay.
Shirley Jones.
Okay. I will check that out. But yeah, like people like John Wayne. I mean, how can you not how can you deny John Wayne? John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara. Gold, they were one of the golden pairs on the screen all the time. So, uh but yeah, it's
Shenandoah is a great movie with those two.
yep. And there's several classics that we continuously watch. Key Largo, we like to watch Key Largo a lot. Um, but it's funny because you definitely gravitate to the ones that seem to resonate to you the most. And a lot of these movies back then, they were plenty. I mean, it's not as much now, of course, but there's so many good movies out there, but there's movies for anyone to enjoy.
Mhm.
And they were for the most part, like 95% of them were great. So, I mean, you didn't have to worry about a movie being too if it felt like it was too being trying to be too serious or too quirky or whatever. It all everything made sense, and the movies themselves knew what they were. Like if
Mhm.
it was
Oh, there were
A Marx Brothers movie, everybody knew what those movies
They
were.
knew what they
I
were going to
mean,
get. Knew what
y-
they were going to get. Yeah.
exactly. So,
well,
but they were great in their own way because they played within their own rules. So,
absolutely. I was going to say there are exceptions that you run into, like the Little Dictator when Chaplin at the end makes his plea and starts calling everyone comrade. You know, at the end of World War One, you
mm,
would have heard people refer to each other commonly as comrade, but in 1940, the term comrade was very much associated with communism and especially the Soviet Union. So people dunked on him big time about
mm,
that.
Well, I have the link in the description. I put it in our private chat for you two guys in case you didn't see it. It is on YouTube. The whole movie is on YouTube. DK Classics has like a set of channels. Actually, if you look up, if you click the little icon for their thing, you go over to their channel, you'll find he has like multiple channels with tons and tons of old movies in their entirety. Now, I have no idea how he pulls off having this many. I'm not, there's no way I believe this many of them are in public domain, but many of them are. So,
There are some people out there that that's their entire shtick is they research what they can have in there, and you know, I have a friend of mine that does much the same thing, and you would be amazed how much skull sweat is used to get away with it.
it's good. It's good. Any last thoughts, Dean, before we let you go?
Uh, Very enjoyable. If you ever want to do another one, my suggestion when you asked about a warm film is 12 O'Clock High. If you ever want to bring that
that's a
up.
great movie. I love that one.
All right, you're outvoted.
It's Gregory Peck is so good in that movie. Oh,
Yeah,
so
it lost out only because I hadn't done an older film, like more like a comedy romance kind of film. So I was like, oh, I
Oh,
should probably do something like that. That's why I didn't do the war movie because we'd done a war movie for something else.
oh,
So
certainly,
yes.
certainly.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even dream of bringing up a shark picture. Yeah,
Oh my
Iron
God. All right.
Castor
Now
would
I'm in
never forgive me.
therapy. I went to therapy. My wife, okay, Mags, you do realize the shark joke on my channel, right? The shark stuff's happened. Ironcaster, there's a shark caster picture and meme, the whole nine. So we've been in the middle of Shark Week, which is Shark Month, Shark Fest, Talk Shark. So we've done sharks. And Meg, the new Meg movie comes out this week. So I had messaged Mrs. Pops about, hey, by the way, the Meg's coming out. And she was like, really? She was really question mark, like, really? Like the shark stuff's not over yet? I'm like, well, that's the end. It's like, we watched the Meg movie. That'll be the end. But she really question mark. Like, so yes, but
You should have talked about Sharknado then.
They've done that one.
We have had a lot of talk about Sharknado, but because Stone Loki's significant other has all of them and has subjected it to him, I said, well, I want to do Sharknado. I want to have her come on.
Oh,
so
yeah.
we'll figure that out as the dust starts to settle for them. Yeah. This year, the obscure one, the bad one, I should say, the bad one was Cocaine Shark, which neither had much cocaine or shark in it. It was, yeah. So
it is what it is.
It was not living up to its name. Last year was Shark Side of the Moon, which is an abomination. But
I watched that, and I'm still, Ironcaster lives somewhere in Michigan. I may just have to give him a swirly if we ever cross paths.
I think you need to make sure you videotape that and make sure I know.
It's for your own good.
That's good.
Obviously it didn't happen to you enough. Just giving you the heads up.
Yeah.
This is for Pops.
You've been put on notice, buddy. But listen, folks, Sullivan's Travels is a fun movie. Like I said, the link will be in the description for you to check it out for yourself. Give us your thoughts, how much you enjoyed it or not. Give us some feedback. It's been such a great recommendation from this guy right over here. I don't always do that well. And this lady joining me and just bringing her thoughts, and especially the fact that, when you have just a love of that kind of cinema, Mags, I think it's always fun to just kind of take a pause and talk about it, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm gonna check this one out, and I will message both of you later and tell you even further my thoughts on this. It's funny because there's so many movies back then. Of course, it's not the same plethora amount that we have now, but there's so many movies back then that I'm continuously discovering new recommendations of things that I probably would never have discovered on my own. So thank you, Dean. Thank you, Pops.
No problem. Once again, thank you guys. Thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I got to leave in 3 minutes, so later.
Take care, Dean. Thanks so much for doing this. Folks, this is part of why we do the Throwback Day. It's been great to do this, and I really appreciate it. Thanks to everybody being out there. Appreciate you doing it. I am Pops.
Rap Circle is finally here. I know everybody been waiting for it, right?